Now, you've got a few different types of wills. You really don't need to know too much about notarial will. That's for the province of Quebec, so I'm not covering that, so that you'll be aware of that. English form is the most common form. We're going to talk more about some of the details there. It's acceptable in all common law provinces in Canada. International will is, and this may come into play in our society in Canada now, because we are basically a melting pot for many different cultures, and you may have assets in different countries, you may have business interest. Government will be happy to know about this, by the way, because you'll know on your tax return if you have a certain asset base, and if your income, they want to know about your Canadian income and your income outside of Canada, and the reason for that is to make sure that they can collect as much tax as possible. So sometimes, I'll give you an example of what I'm referring to. It doesn't relate specifically to this, but you'll get the point. Many years ago, when people were coming back from a trip from another country, they had to fill out a form declaring, how long they were away, where they were, what purchases did they make. Pretty standard form. You fill it out on the airplane before you go through customs when you land. And the government took that and matched it with people that were collecting unemployment insurance. And sure enough, a lot of people were traveling at the taxpayers' expense. And I heard that they collected over $200 million in people that were supposed to be looking for a job. Instead, they went home for a holiday. Now, this wasn't really fair because people weren't told that they were going to use that form, but I think in reality it is fair. If you're collecting taxpayer money, like, cut the crap and go look for a job. So the government was kind of right in that sense, but then what about our privacy? Well, cut the crap. But this just shows that sometimes one document that you may think is in your best interest, depending on who's viewing that document, that may not actually turn out to be the case. But anyways, that's the rationale of an international will. For people who do not have a lot of assets, their life is just not complicated, pretty simple. They may just have one or two kids, and the money's going to the two kids equally to be shared. You can do a holograph will. If the amount of money is negligible, it's better than nothing, for sure. It's easily contestable, but if you only have two kids, who's going to contest it? They're taking the money, they're dividing it by two, then that would be fine. Different issues involved between an English form will, which we'll talk about, and the holograph, which is a pretty simple. You sit down and you say, I leave the person that made this video all of my worldly possessions and anything else that can possibly be found, and make sure you spell my name correctly. It's just that simple. You sit down. The problem is, the next day, maybe you wake up with a headache and you change your will. So I guess that's one way to get a lot of free lunches. And just as a quick little story, I used to kid the students in class about how you can make sure that everyone shows up at your funeral and it looks like they're mourning. There's a perfect way to do this. I used to teach a class on wills, and it was really quite a humorous story, that you call up your relatives one by one, and you say, look, I've got all these assets, and I want you to be receiving some, and you can be the executor, and we need just to get together and have lunch and talk about it, and so we can plan. I guarantee you they'll pay for lunch. And then you go to the next relative and the next. So you've done this with 35 of your relatives, and you got free lunches. When you die, they all show up, and maybe they're sad that you're gone, but they're kind of happy because they're going to be receiving something. But when they find out that it was just like a scam, then I guarantee you they will be in tears, and the people at the funeral will go, wow, he must have been a great human being. Look at how much these people are crying. I always thought that would be kind of a humorous story. Now, I'll just go through some of the key information. Most people would tend to have an English form will, and if your asset or your estate plan is anywhere worthwhile or has any type of complexity, you should go see a lawyer and get some advice. The reason that I'm doing this is for my son, and if people can watch this, then at least they'll have working knowledge about what to do, and they'll have done all the groundwork, and it'll cost you an awful lot less money. And of course, you'll just send me the money that you would have paid, and everybody's happy. in my dreams. So English form will, it's valid in all common law provinces in Canada. In some parts of Quebec, I have no knowledge about that because I haven't lived there and I don't plan to move to Quebec, and I know they have a different system, and theirs is largely based on a notarial will. It can be done in handwriting by the one who makes the will, or typed, or it can even be a combination. I don't think that any lawyer on this planet would make a will half typed, half written. You would begin to wonder if it wasn't made at different times. Is it really valid? Da 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 da. And if you go down here a little bit further, I'll just give you an idea of what I'm referring to. It must be signed by the one who makes the will. That's called the testator. And at the bottom of the will, there must be two witnesses present when the testator actually makes the final will document. These witnesses cannot be beneficiaries, just so you know, because that would be a conflict of interest, because I could be a beneficiary and have a gun at your head and say, yeah, I think that maybe we should sign these documents. So, I mean, there's a good reason for that. The other thing that I think people should do, and again, it's up to your lawyer, in theory, if it's a complex will, have everybody sign every page so that somebody can't come up later and say that a page was added because you only signed one page. Let's assume it was, say, the last page. So just like a separate issue, or maybe they could initial every page, but you know, just something to think about. Anything that could possibly go wrong probably will in somewhere along the way. Now, just one comment here. In the event that the testator, the one who made the will, is not able to sign, for maybe they can't read or write, I mean, that would really lend a lot of credence to the fact that maybe there was collusion going on here, because maybe they didn't really realize what they were doing. But for whatever practical reason, if they could not sign, someone else could sign for them. A lot of people are making now, we're in the digital age, people are making video tapes of their last will and testament, and I think that's a phenomenal idea. And the document can be properly stored on a USB in a safety deposit box, or safe at home, and then you can see the person, you can see their state of mind. There is the risk that somebody who makes a will, and if somebody gets excluded or left out, they could say they were not of sound mind, and then it becomes a subjective issue when you get to court. So you know, you really don't want that. Some people are very knowledgeable, very bright, but they do not know how to write. And there was a famous hockey player, I'm not going to say his name to protect him, but he could not write, so he would just sign his name with an X, but actually became a pretty rich guy. So maybe there's a benefit to not knowing how to read or write. Now, holograph will, very simple. You can just sit down, you could write it on a wall. Just make sure you keep the wall in a safe place. Check this one, because at the point when I was actually writing this book, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia would not accept holograph. I have no current knowledge. Anything that you see here, always check to make sure, because laws are always changing, and this is just kind of the way our society is. We're constantly evolving. The big problem with this kind of a will is there's no witnesses. How do you know it was you who did it? It could just be in handwriting, not even typed, and if it was typed, it could be anybody who typed it and forged the signature. They are easily contestable, but generally the people that do holograph tend not to have a lot of assets, so why get in a big fight over nothing? So I mean, you know, you need to weigh those factors, but just be aware of what the term is and what the good points and the bad points are.